everybody, welcome to another Broken Meeple video. I'm Luke Hector, and if you like what you see, please remember to share on social media, give it a thumbs up, and comment on the video about your thoughts. I'd like to engage with you on a personal level. And also don't forget that the Patreon campaign is always running if you want to help support the channel a little bit further. So this is a pretty much on-the-fly ad hoc video I'm doing. It's a first impressions video, so this is literally after one play, okay? Normally when I do a review video, despite what some trolls like to try and say every now and again, I do play games a lot before they get reviewed, okay? But this is definitely one that I've only played once before I give this first impressions. Mainly, well, we'll get onto more detail on that in a second, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But this is the defense of Procyon III. This is a Kickstarter that has just been fulfilling from PSC Games, and it's designed by David Turksey. And if you don't know who David Turksey is and you're a board gamer, then seriously, go do some research. Because this guy basically nails himself to just about every solo mode you find in a lot of heavy Euro games, but also has a few personal titles to his name, particularly along the side of kind of like conflicty wars type games, actually. So PSC Games tend to do sort of more historical warish based games. I mean, they've done things like Lincoln and that in the past. So to have like a kind of spacey war one is kind of weird for them. But as I say, it's not typically a genre I go mad for, wargaming. But the idea with this is that this is a huge asymmetrical 2v2 team game. And the reason I'm not getting all the pieces out is because, frankly, there's too much in this box. There's quite a bit in here. I mean, just to get the lid off at least is pretty tough enough. And once you've got that off, this huge box, you've got boards, you have got rule books aplenty, more on that in a second. You have got two giant boards, you have got all these miniatures here, miniatures for different races and cards and that in various plasticky trays. That is what you get. I'm not getting them all out for you right now because this would take forever to do. But let's keep that there and sort of give that to the side a little bit. But the idea with this is that it's 2v2. So two players play the alien faction, space and ground, and two other players play the human faction, again, space and ground. The idea being that the two are going head to head each other, but each has an asymmetrical style of play and different kind of objectives that they're doing. But it is still a 2v2. So the space alien player is going directly against the space human player, but they have the means to occasionally help out their ground alien teammate, and same for the human space player, and vice versa. The idea is that the human ground player is going up against the space ground player. This is going to get really hard to follow at some point, you know, you will be tested. But this kind of how this works. It's all about survival for the humans, while it's about more conquering for the aliens, and each one plays out very differently. The alien space player uses some dice, and depending which dice they use, they get more actions for certain things in a turn. But then the human space player is more about kind of building up a little combat deck for themselves, uses a bit more randomness, but they get a lot more stuff to do with their ships. The alien ground player uses a weird board with a card selection mechanic, as well as a bag building where they draw cubes out of a bag to dictate whether they're going to hit stuff or not. And the human ground player has got like 3 heroes, a deck of cards, and does a lot more of that. It's very interesting how they are very different to play, and that is definitely one of the key points here. You are definitely playing a much more asymmetrical game than in most. Think for like Root. Root is a good example of you could compare this to, because Root, you play a similar game, you're not doing a team versus team, but you are playing a very different game as, say, the Vagabond or whatever he's called, versus, say, the Cats. Yeah, so it's kind of the same deal with this. Now, we have played one game of this, okay? And you might be thinking, well, does that mean you think the game is bad? No, I don't think the game is bad. But if you look up the word niche in a dictionary, oh my word, I think we need a new definition. This is an incredibly niche game. This is for a very specific audience. I'm not that audience. And let me just highlight a few points that might just illustrate what I'm talking about here. When you open the box, you are greeted with 5 rule books.
21 gigawatts!
What on earth? That is insane. 1 main rule book, which highlights a few little key bits, but mainly it's for solo play and stuff like that. And then you've got 1 rule book for each of the factions. And each one is a 23-page rule book with setup and movement and text and pictorial diagrams and a big reference chart on the back per player. you are supposed to effectively randomly like attribute who's playing what. So we randomly said, right, who's playing what faction. I ended up playing Meld, which is the space alien faction, right? And each of us was told to read the rulebook in advance, understand how their things work, get the reference aid, and then we'd play a 4-player game. We still had to look up the rulebook a lot though, because these rulebooks are not bad, but they are not intuitive. The rules are not intuitive. The stuff on the board is not going to suddenly make you realize, oh yeah, that's how that works, or that's how that works. No, you need to be pretty much glued to this rulebook, particularly in your first game, as we found, to get used to it. Now, I gather that if you play this often enough, you will get used to it, and you probably wouldn't need to refer it too much, but that's the thing. This is not a game you can play casually. You have to play this with the same group, same players, possibly even the same factions for a while, regularly, to get the most out of this game. Remember a game called Oath that I think came out, Oathsworn or whatever it was last year from Leader Games, like the sequel to Root effectively? That was another example where everybody who reviewed it said it was a great game. Well, alright, no, actually, lies. Like, a lot of people said it was good, but they all said pretty much that it required the same group to play. This is that times 12. You need a dedicated group, and the problem is that all 4 of us kind of bounced off this game. And I was actually the one who liked it the most. The other 3 bounced off it a bit harder, particularly one player who really bounced off it hard. Because the problem is that you got a lot of these rules to look up. It's difficult for one player to help another player with the rules, because I don't know how the ground faction works for humans. So if you don't know how they work, how am I supposed to help you? So you might think, well, why don't you learn all the rules in advance? Yeah, you try learning 4 separate rule books of 20-something pages in advance of a game and try and tell me that that's doable.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
No, that is not happening. So it made things very difficult to sort of get going. Now, things got a little bit smoother as we got halfway through the game, but even so, we're still having to look up these rules quite often. Now, in terms of the mechanics and the actual, like, back and forth, that was pretty fun. I mean, I enjoyed, like, having to think, right, well, I've got to do this stuff against the human space player, but then how am I going to give a hand to my alien ground person there? Although, I would have liked a bit more interaction with the teammate than this game gives you, because it's not a lot, really. You have the occasional card in your deck that may help out the other player, but in doing so, you're not really helping yourself out much. And then sometimes one of your units or something might get used to do something on their board. That's pretty much it. Other than that, I've got no way to influence the human ground player. Whatever they do, I don't care. It's his problem. But all I can basically go and do is go, well, I got this card that might help you. Yeah, fancy me playing it? Yeah, cool, fine, I'll play it on my turn. Or it might be a case that he says, can I borrow one of your little rubble spaceship things? I want to land it on my planet. And it's like, yeah, but I wanted to do this turn, but it's like, alright, fine, you can have another one. And that's kind of really your discussion with each other. A game I love on my shelf, right behind me somewhere, where is it? Where did I put them? Oh, they're all downstairs now. My Mind Clash games, Cerebria. 2 versus 2. And now, you're not playing asymmetrical games each because you're playing the same game, but you can design your spirits in 2 very different ways, and there's a lot of discussion with your partner about what you need to do. I didn't find I really needed to discuss much with my teammate here. At least nothing more than a few passing sentences, which is easy enough to do. I don't know what the human ground player is doing. I gotta worry about my human space player. Same for my teammate. It's like, he doesn't know what the human space player is gonna do. Probably doesn't even understand how the mechanics of their game work. And this leads to another problem. Do you remember a game called Twilight Struggle? The one that was supposedly on #1 of Board Game Geek for a while. Don't ask me how. Board Game Geek rankings are stupid anyway. But the problem with that game is that if you are a casual player of Twilight Struggle, you will get hammered because there are cards in that game. It's a 1 versus 1 card game, and what happens is that you end up with situations where there's a card that completely screws over a certain part of the board. Like there's one in there that I think really mucks up Japan if you're playing one side. If the other player doesn't know that card exists, they're going to get screwed by it. But you can't tell them it exists because it nerfs the card. So it's not very interesting for the player who gets screwed by it. It just feels vindictive. It just feels like mean, really. And that is replicated here in spades because each player has cards in their deck and like that are unique to them. And particularly for the ground players, I found, it's not too bad with the space players. You tend to see relatively quickly what the space meld player cards are. I mean, some of them are already on the board face up for you to evolve into, occasionally, not often enough for my liking. But the ground players have got quite a lot of cards in their respective decks. I ain't got a clue what's in each of them. And when they're playing their first, second, maybe third game, they don't know what's in each player's deck. And with 20 or 25 plus cards, it's not like you can tell that somebody's going to have that card in their hand ready to use. But I'll give some key examples. The player who bounced off this the hardest was playing the ground human faction. And it tells them, alright, use suppression. Suppression is how you do a lot of damage. Okay, I'll do suppression. The alien space player basically just puts down a card and says, oh well, that's it, I ignore your suppression. Oh. Well, what was the point of suppression then? And then later on, it's like, well, hang on, I'm going to put up these deflectors next to this pylon here because that will make life harder for you. And then the alien's ground player just plays a card that says gain 4 victory points and remove both deflectors. A card. A single card screws over his entire plan. And that happened frequently to the ground human player. That's not fun. I felt sorry for him because he's basically getting screwed over by what basically akins to randomness. You don't know those, you know now those cards exist in the deck, but you don't know when they're going to turn up. And if you know that the opponent has abilities on their board or a card that can screw your entire plan over, then what makes you want to do that plan in the first place? It just seems really, I don't know, that just seemed like a big misstep here. And each of the factions are not balanced in terms of the randomness. The space meld player that I was doing, the space meld, spaceship agent, sorry, they don't have much randomness at all. They roll a few dice and that's about it. But honestly, it's pretty easy to use the dice in whichever way you want. I never found that I was like, oh, I wish I had a better dice. That didn't really happen for me. I didn't even care about refreshing my dice. One card lets me get more in because when they all run out, you roll them all and you lose a couple of victory points. I honestly didn't care. Ooh no, I lose 2 victory points, but I don't have to waste my turn retrieving dice. It's like, whatever, I don't care. And I just felt that I had all the control in the world. My opponent has to build a little mini combat deck and hope that the hits that turn up are how many hits they need. My player to my left has to draw cubes out of a bag, and if they don't draw black cubes, they don't hit anything. Wow. And then the other player, as I say, is drawing from a deck and has still got a fair bit of randomness, although not quite as much on that one. So, obviously these factions are being balanced in a way that, the ones that have got more randomness can do more powerful effects, but randomness is still randomness. It's a really tricky thing to balance, and so sometimes you are just going to have your turn nerfed because of luck. And when the game is only a maximum of 10 rounds, that's not a lot of time you can afford to waste on a whiffle, effectively. Now, storage is not bad. I mean, you've got a tray for each player. The miniatures and everything sort of go into those trays. You lift it out, give it to the player, and it's all their stuff. Putting it back in the box, though, is a little bit weird. If you don't put the trays back in the exact order that they come packaged, it won't fit properly, and so you'll end up with box lift. I only discovered that, and I was getting frustrated trying to think, well, which way did they go back in? Because, annoyingly, there's no diagram in the book that tells you how to put it back in the box. But what really got on my goat was I got given these like little additional things. I think these were like a Kickstarter upgrade, like a deluxe upgrade. You're probably thinking, well, why is it only partially full? This basically gave you miniature upgrades for various tokens or tiles on the board, right? And some of them fit into specific cubby holds in the trays for the faction. Like they were purposely designed to hold those pieces. These don't have them though. I could probably squeeze the deflectors into this somehow if I wedged them in certain places, but the pylons? Where's the bit in the tray that holds this? And even if this, where's the bit in the tray in here that holds this giant orange? This is the lunar refinery that you have in space, and I guarantee you there is nowhere in the box to store this thing. So I can't store 7 little miniatures for this game. I've got to somehow keep this separate because it won't fit in the box. Who designed these trays? Fail. Absolute fail. If there is a way to do it, it certainly isn't intuitive, and as I say, diagrams help. Remember the Anachrony Infinity box, you know, that uses that had that big diagram of how things store in the box? Those things are useful. Use it more often. But that's a little nitpick, whatever. So, yeah, you might not even have these anyway. So it sounds like I'm harping on the game a bit. Now, there were good aspects to it though. The fact that it is asymmetrical is cool. If you're a fan of this game, you could get 4 very different styles of play from playing this 4 different times, if you're willing to learn the rules. The solo rules, blimey, you know, those rules, hey, you know, I've not played this solo, I must admit, you know, but I wanted to try and learn the game by playing it solo at first. Except to learn it solo, you have to learn a specific scenario in, like, bot card decks, basically. You have to learn all those rules in this. You have to read this rulebook for the ground human faction and the space one. 3 rulebooks to learn a solo mode.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Sorry, I don't have the time or patience for that. You know, I like solo modes, and I mentioned this in my last podcast. How much effort do I want to put into a heavy solo mode? This is definitely a heavy game. This is not a medium weight game. You might think, oh, the rules aren't that complicated. Yeah, but you've got 4 separate books to deal with and multiple things going on. It's a heavy game. Deal with it. But with this, I don't want to put that kind of effort into a solo mode. I like a solo mode that gets me going quick. This requires you to do a ton of setup, multiple factions worth of setup, learn 3 separate rule books. I mean, granted, if you're a fan of this game and you know it inside out, you can definitely do the solo rules in this. But unless you've got a ton of time on your hand, like Mark Dainty has on Not Board Gaming, you know, he's played this solo. You wanna know more about the solo of this? Go check out Mark Dainty, find him on Facebook, on the solo Facebook groups, and get his thoughts on it. Because he was willing to spend nearly a day to like put this sort of thing together. It took me nearly a day just to get like sorted with like how things worked and be able to get it into a situation where I was comfortable to host it on a game night. I haven't got the time to put in that kind of effort. And after playing the multiplayer game, I honestly don't think I would enjoy the solo that much more to warrant that kind of effort. But as I say, I will stipulate I have not played this solo. But in the multiplayer, I did enjoy like the mechanics I had. There was definitely a lot of thinking you had to do. There was definitely a lot of like, almost like tug of war-ish with the opponent. Like, oh, if I go there, what are you going to do? How are you going to react? You know, you're a threat there. Maybe if I do, there's some good little strategies you can pull. Although I did find myself going after the lunar refinery and not having any opposition whatsoever. So that was kind of easy. It left my planet a little bit undefended in certain areas, but killing Lunar Refinery was such a good boost for me to get ships built for free and to get those victory points that it was kind of stupid not to go for it. Not one point did the opponent want to go from a mothership because it's too easily like secure behind closed doors. So mainly they tried to get scientists off the planet, which is very difficult unless you have half your fleet there to stop the male player, you know, screwing them over at the last minute. And to be honest, because I can build these Cobras, which are kind of ships that do multiple actions, it's not too difficult for me to basically spam a ton of clouds in one area and kill multiple ships in a turn if you activate the right kind of ships. Now, maybe that was just good play on my part, I don't know. But it did feel like the Armada was kind of on the back foot for a lot of the time. Initially, they were good. You know, they march in and start killing off a few of my things. But once I was able to get into my stride, it seemed like I don't know how the Armada could possibly win at that point, or do me a favor. And at the end of the day, the space players pretty much annihilated the alien players pretty much annihilated the human players in this. But I wasn't entirely certain if it was down to tactics of one particular player or just the fact that randomness screwed over a few people. I don't know. It felt a little anticlimactic, and to be honest, after what, like 2.5, 3 hours of playing this game, which I think the game took with 4 of us, I was kind of just glad that it was over, really. After 3 hours of like, oh my god, how's this working? All of us kind of bouncing off the game a little bit. I just wasn't, you know, desperate to carry on. So, as I say, there were good aspects. I do respect the fact that this is definitely something different. I think this is quite an innovative style of wargame to be like this themed, and the theme is good here. I mean, it definitely feels like a kind of almost Starship Troopers-esque aliens versus humans thing, and it is cool to have a board for space, a board for ground, and for these multiple things to go on. It does feel like an epic game. but I would have liked more interaction with my teammate. I would have liked it to be a lot easier to get into. I mean, these rule books, it's a lot of information to absorb. I mean, it was easier for me to learn Arc Nova. Okay, Arc Nova, a 2.5 to 3 hour Euro game with 4 players. I can learn and teach this in quicker time than I can this. That's saying something, you know. And in fact, I dare say Anachrony, another like one of my favorite games David Turksey has made, I can learn that easier than this. That is saying something. It's just expecting me to learn a ton of these rules if I want to teach it better is a lot to ask. But then also getting a group that's willing to constantly read these rule books and get used to them is a big ask as well. And this is what I'm saying here. It's niche. I can see that people have enjoyed this. People have commented on my photos and that and said they've really enjoyed this game, that they've gone, oh yeah, I love it. I can completely 100% see why, because I see the potential in this. I see that if you're willing to devote all that time to it, if you've got a dedicated group, if you're into this kind of game, you don't mind the little randomness bits here and there, I can see people having a blast playing this. And for that reason, I'm conducting a little experiment. There's a friend of mine who helps out with he owns Dice Portsmouth, and he's involved with his job and hobby-wise into like war games, you know, those types of things. He helps design them, he helps make them for various reasons and stuff. But he and his group are into this kind of stuff, although more historical based, maybe fantasy based. But this sounds like right up their alley, and he's already interested in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this on to him and his group, okay? And in their own time, I'm not forcing them to do it quickly or anything like that, but they're hopefully going to learn this and play it. And I want to get their feedback as to what they think of the game. And when they do, if they do manage to play it and give me feedback, I'll mention it on a podcast episode and refer back to this. But it's just, the problem is I'm not the target audience. I do not have a dedicated group I could play this with. You know, the group I was playing this with is probably as dedicated a group as I can get, because in board game clubs I'm playing with multiple different people and I can't constantly teach this to new players. It would be an absolute nightmare. I mean, I can't imagine how unbalanced this would be if you had 3 people who knew this game inside out and 1 new player. It would be fundamentally unbalanced. But, you know, the group that I could dedicate to this, again, we'd probably never want to play this more than once a month max, and we've got plenty of other games we want to play, big heavy Euros. And bear in mind, this is my heavy Euro gamer group, okay, so it's not like it's too heavy for us. No, we play heavy Euro games. But we would never be able to dedicate more than once a month to this. None of them want to play this again. You know, they bounced off it harder than I did. I at least saw a fair bit of potential here. But then, if you don't play this like weekly or fortnightly at least, I just don't think you would remember most of the rules in this or get anywhere near the enjoyment from it. So you need a dedicated group, dedicated fans, dedicated rulebook readers, and you've got to be into this genre. If that's the case, I think you will get a blast out of this, and I think most people who have backed this on Kickstarter and who are enjoying this are probably in that category. If so, perfect. Fair play to you. You're getting a pretty unique game here, and certainly one that fits your bill. It just sadly didn't fit mine. Like I say, I don't think the game is bad. It just isn't. It isn't for me. You know, war games are hit and miss for me anyway. The amount of effort it takes to learn this and get it to the table and have that dedicated group is just beyond my capabilities, and that hurts my enjoyment of the game. You know, it just does. But I'm not saying that you should not grab this. I'm not saying that this is a horrible game at all. Then bear in mind, this is only first impressions. You know, maybe if I played it another 10 times or so, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, you know, this is really good and I'm really enjoying it. I'm just never going to get the chance to play it 10 times over. It's just not going to happen. You know, the amount of time it would take me to arrange another game of this, it'd probably be another month later, and by that point I've forgotten half of it. So I had to get this first impressions video out and just let you know that this is my first thoughts on it, and to let you know that this is definitely a niche game, not for casual players, not for anyone who isn't a heavy gamer. You need to be into this, you need to have the group and the dedication to make this work. And if you do, I reckon it will work. That's the thing, I reckon it will work. We'll see what my friend has to say when I give it to their War Game Society. Maybe they'll love it to bits, in which case they can keep this, and I hope they'll enjoy it as a good present from me. But yeah, it's just not one that's going to go for me. I'd rather play something that's a little bit easier and quicker to get to a table more often with groups of players that I play with at my game clubs. So, as I say, that's just the way it is. So that's it for me on this first impressions video. Hope you like what you see. If you do, please thumbs up the video and leave a comment. What are your thoughts? Are you a fan of this game? Do you have that dedicated group? In which case, are you really enjoying this game? Let me know your thoughts. You know, is there something that I missed out of my first game that would have made this a lot better? I don't know. As well, it's first impressions. This is not a full review. I'm not even giving this a rating out of 10 because I don't think it's fair to give it a rating. But I wanted to give my thoughts on it because PSC kindly gave me a copy of the game and I wanted to dig myself into this as much as I could. It's just sadly not one, it's just one that I kind of bounced off. But as I say, let me know your thoughts. Until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including a top 10 video of games that killed other games, as well as a detailed review of the aforementioned Ark Nova, which I did at the end of last year. Take care, and remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.